was a long journey, all the way from the Midwest to the Wild West, to the gold rush, and then on to Vancouver Island.
They received a letter from James Douglas from up here who wanted settlers to come up to BC and make this their home.
It was the 1850s, a time when this part of the country was booming.
They ventured west by a 4-yoked bullock team.
Karen Hochul is the great-granddaughter of one of those hundreds of black pioneers who came to settle in British Columbia, and she's more than willing to share with others her family history.
I was raised in a black household, so you had to learn the history, because I would stand there and go, how come you're so dark and I'm so light?
Charles and Nancy Alexander are Hochul's great-grandparents. They had 12 children. Hochul is the granddaughter of the youngest child, John.
2 of Charles's children died in a skating accident, and it was at Humber's Pond, which is down on the gorge where the buses are kept. That's where Humber's Pond was. And they drowned skating there, and when they were found the next day, they were found hanging onto each other under the ice.
And right here in central Saanich, this is the Shady Creek United Church, and it was built more than 150 years ago, and it still stands here. But this is where some of the first black pioneers right around this area, this is where they first settled right here on the island.
But they did have a home near the church.
This church we're standing in was partly designed and built by Charles, who was also the first preacher at Shady Creek.
He had built and designed these pews, which are still in use today. Everybody complains about how uncomfortable they are, but Charles was heard to say that they were not built for comfort. They were built so that you would sit up straight to hear the word of the Lord.
Even after making the journey from St. Louis, going all the way across to San Francisco, and then making the journey all the way up to Victoria, the Alexanders, along with the other black pioneers, didn't escape the discrimination. There was plenty of it right here in the region.
And the discrimination came from when they went into town. And that's where they would run into some troubles. But the blacks weren't the only people that were discriminated against. So were the Chinese. I did it for 3 years.
Hochul's family is buried in the cemetery beside the church. The names on the headstones are starting to fade, but the history is still there in the form of a plaque.
I lobbied for 2 years to get that plaque erected in this cemetery.
Hochul lived with her grandparents while growing up and would hear stories about her great-grandparents. She says she feels connected to her past because of this church.
Well, it makes me feel really good because I know where they came from, I know where they settled, I know they built this church, and belonging to this church makes me feel like I'm connected to them, even though they've long passed.
Today, the descendants of the Alexanders are 400 to 500 strong. The reunions happen every 5 years with young and old, and the story of this family lives on through Hochul and Shady Creek. In central Saanich, I'm Sucheta Singh.